So you probably noticed a lot of headlines about Kanye West this past week, and they're upsetting. Okay, he's been making really inflammatory comments, including his praise of Hitler, and he tried to sell swastika t-shirts on his website. So today on Commotion, where do we go from here with Kanye West? I'm Rad Simon Play, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, so we've talked about Kanye on this show before, but here we are again, and it just keeps getting worse. On top of the anti-Semitic rants I just mentioned, Ye, as he's known now, has also been slapped with a lawsuit from a former Jewish employee. She claims that when she worked for him, she was subjected to harassment and discrimination. And Ye also put out a bunch of triggering social media posts where he defended Sean Combs and Chris Brown. And here's the problem that some of us in the media are struggling with, okay? Like, do we report on and call out Ye's offensive rhetoric, or does that just amplify and encourage his worst behaviors? To help me unpack all of this, we got Ian Cohen and Rollie Pemberton. Hello, fellas.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, remember when we got to talk about better times and stuff? But Ian, I'm going to start with you. How are you accounting for Kanye's extreme behavior and these anti-Semitic rants we've been seeing over the past week?
For this, I'm going to have to step aside from my role as music critic and just play the resident American geopolitical expert here. It's almost impossible to view this outside the scope of everything else that's happening in American culture, American politics right now. I mean, you can draw on any number of things, whether it's, Trump's cabinet appointments or the pardoning of the January 6 rioters or the dismissal of Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City's very, very blatant corruption cases, and Elon Musk having 20-year-olds with access to federal funding. There's just this greater sense right now, in addition to a rise in hate speech, that there's just no consequences for anything. Laws are meaningless, and if somebody's famous enough, they can get away with anything. And so I hate to say that the environment to have one of our most famous celebrities selling swastika branded t-shirts, it feels like a very February 2025 thing, because there's this sense that he's going to do it and nothing bad materially could happen to him.
Mm-hmm. This I think all adds to the feeling of becoming numb, right? And Rollie, we've gotten used to this. We've gotten used to seeing Kanye make outrageous and offensive statements for over a decade now, right? But is there something about this latest wave of provocations that feels different to you?
Yeah, we've seen this movie before with Kanye, for sure. But I think the difference right now is really there's nothing for him to lose at this point. There's nothing really holding him back. He's literally lost his wife, all of his sponsors. So I think this is what's happens is all you have left is the monster. From his song Monster, he's hinted at this kind of duality of man. No one man should have all that power, he said. And he's proven it here with his actions. I think all of this is because he can't really do with the music anymore. I know, he had a little moment from the Vultures one, but it's really diminishing returns with everything he's been putting out. And he's become a shell of himself, this person who keeps calling himself the greatest, but he can't really back it up with the music. And this is what we have, just somebody just going out there to get attention any way they can.
Yeah. Well, look, you were talking just there about how he lost his sponsorships, right? And we're talking about lucrative sponsorships with Adidas and the Gap and so many more. And look, effectively, he's been canceled, right? And yet the industry keeps making space for him. When you think about last week, the Grammy stunt, right? When his wife Bianca Censori, she walked the red carpet in this completely see-through dress, and then he later claimed to have complete dominion over her. That happened because he was invited to be there. And he was invited to be there because he was a nominee, right? His single Carnival was nominated for Best Rap Song. So Ian, would you characterize, how would you characterize his place in the music industry at this moment?
Well, when we talk about whether or not somebody is canceled, Carnival has something along the lines of 700 million streams. It's one of his biggest songs of all time, and he was nominated for a Grammy. And so, in certain polite spaces, you might say he's canceled. his album might not be reviewed in like Pitchfork or Rolling Stone or what have you, but there's just so much of a bigger world out there. And how cancel can you call someone when they have an ad on during the Super Bowl? Like quite literally something that I think 126 million people watched it. And I know it was only in local markets, but all the same, I mean, look, we're talking about it, and I think it's interesting to think about what it means for like an artist to be quote unquote canceled as opposed to like a political actor being canceled. Because we could say that, you know, Kanye doesn't have the critical acclaim or just the kind of cultural juice that he used to. Like Rollie was saying, like all these stunts have diminishing returns, and it just looks more and more sad and desperate with passing time. And yet he is still one of the most famous people in the world. Like we could say he's canceled. He's going to find a way to get his message out, which is really getting to the idea of how can we deplatform someone like him as opposed to, I found out that Milo Yiannopoulos is his PR rep, like someone who was effectively deplatformed for hate speech, but he's mostly a political actor, right? Kanye he'll find a way.
You know what's wild about something, but both of you said, because Rollie, on the one hand, you're talking about how his music, you know, it ain't what it was. Like, you know, I think music critics agree his recent music hasn't been anywhere near as good as his early stuff. I mean, even saying I like the old Kanye, like that's tired now, okay? And yet, as Ian was saying, he still got hits. Like his last single, Carnival, it got to #1. Ian said that it had 700 million streams on Spotify. He's still featured on major Spotify playlists. So, like, you know, even though he's been shut out of some industry spaces, like he's still being welcomed into these others. So, Rollie, like, how has he managed to maintain this foothold in mainstream culture as you see it, despite these comments and these views that grow more extreme?
Well, you know, it's hard to shake him. He's a really towering figure in culture, you know, and it's a curious situation because I feel like you can't actually cancel him. He's one of the only people you can't cancel because he has enough money that he's just divested from all the institutions. He doesn't have a label. His agent just dropped him, and I'm sure he doesn't care. He's in charge of everything. And you really can't cancel someone who isn't connected to anything and doesn't care what people think of him, right? I think the big difference that we're looking at, and I think this ties in even to the conversation we're having now, is the difference between Kanye and other artists who've been canceled, so to speak, is Kanye gets clicks, you know, and we're playing all into his hands. All these different platforms are benefiting from having Kanye's music or having a Kanye headline. And I think he's just so insulated by the money. It's, you know, it's hard to shake him.
Oh, my Lord. Well, Rollie, you're a rapper. Okay,
I am.
and you looked up to Kanye for a long time. So how did these controversies, how did they impact your relationship to his music?
I just want to specify that was a long time ago. I haven't looked up to Kanye in a while. You know, the thing that keeps you holding on to Kanye is, and it's really sad actually, is that he really was a musical genius, you know, and you keep hoping that that person is still there deep down. And that's what keeps me checking in on him. Like, even if you look back to Donda, which was 2021, there were a couple songs on there that were amazing, right? And you feel like, oh yeah, Kanye, he's this artist that can take you places no other person in hip hop could. You know, I was a diehard fan. I have Yeezys that are just collecting dust in my basement as we speak. But you know, it's just, I think it's an important thing you got to remember with artists is you can be a musical genius, but you can also be a moron in the rest of your life. And I think this is the biggest example of that I've ever seen with Kanye.
Yeah. You know, it's a snow day, so I think it's a good time to wear those Yeezys and get out in the snow. And that has to do with them. Okay? Ian, I mean, you know, adding to what Rollie was saying, like, are you still listening to Kanye? Can you still listen to him, or has he dropped off your playlist too?
Well, I would say that I can totally listen to anything that precedes Life of Pablo, which I think culturally is a major schism. I mean, 2016 in so many ways is sort of where the world was broken. And that album was very different than his previous self-styled masterpieces in that he was adjusting it, you know, as it was being released. I listened to, and nothing at all to do with my appearance here. I listened to College Dropout just the other day. I'm just very interested to see how a newer generation would interact with this because, like Rollie, like I grew up listening to Kanye. I cannot deny these formative experiences I've had listening to College Dropout and Late Registration, all the way up through Yeezus. Anything that he does right now does not take that away. Like I can't deny those experiences being what they are. I listened to Ye or Ye, how it's pronounced, the one in, I believe it was
Hmm.
2017 or 18 with the I'm Bipolar and I Love It cover. After that, I mean, I could say you couldn't pay me enough to listen to Donda 2 or what have you. I mean, you could pay me enough, but just not what most music publications are paying right now. I don't think I've listened to a new Yeezy song as a whole in the past 5 years. Like the last thing I can think about him being on was like the Playboy Cardi album from 2020.
Mm,
Besides that, I'm just not as on top of things.
yeah.
But what he was saying, what Raleigh's saying, it's like you listen to Donna and you can get those two or three nuggets that will remind you of like what brought us here in the first place. Like now I'm gonna have to like earmark 2 hours of my time today to sort through all that stuff.
I want to latch on to something you said there. Did you say a bipolar and I love it cover that Kanye put out there?
It's something along those lines.
Okay.
It was
No, no, it's I love being bipolar. It's
Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
okay.
So, I mean, but this is, I want to talk about that because, as his behaviors turned like way more erratic over the past decade, there's been all this speculation about his mental health. And like you said, like he embraced that, or he said that he was bipolar. Recently, he added that autism is the real reason for his episode. So, Ian, I mean, how is framing that? Like, well, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, I mean, I also work in the field of mental health, so I'm not going to diagnose anything that he's going through. But, there's this sense that with him putting out the like I'm bipolar or I'm autistic, that it's somehow like plausible deniability or that it excuses things. And I guess my response to that is that there are many people in this world with autism or bipolar one who don't create websites exclusively to sell swastika branded t-shirts.
Mm,
And so this just kind of brings to the fore the things that were perhaps underlying like the whole way through it. Like Raleigh was saying, like there's no guardrails now.
hmm
And so if he ever wanted to sell this merch or say these things, there are no repercussions to it. And I think there's been circumstances where people have tried to help him or seek help for him, and he might end up suing them. So um, that would be how I would frame it.
Okay, well, Rolly, I mean, when you think about everything we're talking about here in terms of the mental health state of Kanye, but also in terms of like, everything he's been putting out there, I mean, I want to take us back to the original question that I started with this discussion is like, how should we in the media, so those of us in the media, how should we treat Kanye? Like, do we call him out or do we ignore him?
Have you ever seen that episode of The Simpsons where the billboards come to life and they're only powerful if you look at them?
Mm,
I feel like that's where we are with Kanye now. I think his time of being relevant as an artist is long past. And if you, I would recommend Ian, if you're gonna go listen to some Kanye, I would skip most of the Vultures and Vultures 2, because on Vultures 2, he's literally has other people rapping, and they put a Kanye AI voice filter over their voice, and he's trying to pass it off as him rapping. So he's not even rapping on the
mm,
records at this point. It's like he's not a musician who deserves any serious attention. And I know he has a platform and he has a lot of fans, but I think we need to collectively just ignore Kanye. He's not that artist anymore.
hmm Well, so Ian, last word to you. You got 30 seconds. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about like how he's just kind of a non-entity as a musician, but we also have to ask ourselves if we don't cover the fact that one of the most famous people, musician or otherwise, is selling a swastika branded t-shirt. Does that minimize it? Does it
Mm,
show that we're not taking it seriously? And so we're kind of in a no-win situation. And I know this is like the most pat answer, but it's sort of like Donald Trump being a politician and a celebrity at the same time. If you deplatform him in one way, it's just going to compensate on the other hand. So we're really just in a no-win situation right now.
yeah. All right. I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that. And look, we got to leave it there. But Rolly, sorry, I keep Rolly and Ian. I mean, you've given me a lot to think about. So thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Rollie Pemberton, a.k.a. Cadence Weapon, is a writer and rapper based in Hamilton. And Ian Cohen is a writer and the co-host of the IndieCast podcast. He's in San Diego. I'm Rad Simon Pillay, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. So Mo Amer is a stand-up comedian, and a couple years ago, he created a show that's part comedy and part drama. It's called Mo. It's loosely based on his life. There's now 2 seasons on Netflix, and Mo stars in it as himself. And FYI, Mo is a Palestinian refugee who grew up in Houston, Texas. So obviously, this is an incredibly political time for a show like this to exist. I mean, think about Gaza is in ruins after more than a year of Israeli attacks. Donald Trump is threatening to take over the Gaza Strip and displace Palestinians. And there's a very tenuous ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. So this is the backdrop when we're watching the final episode of Mo, which is set in the West Bank. Saloni Gajjar called this episode the most heartfelt and important TV episode you'll see right now, bar none. And she's here to talk to me about it. Saloni, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So listen, like that comment, Saloni, what happened in this series finale that made it so powerful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in just speaking broadly to the world, for a lot of people, it's hard to understand the crisis that you were just talking about and the tragedy unfolding in Gaza, because we watch it via news and some people just don't even consume that. So I think a TV show like Mo brings a very kind of resonant and human understanding by looking at the people who are genuinely impacted day to day. And I think the finale kind of achieves that in particular by taking Mo and his family and therefore us, the audience, to Palestine. And it just puts everything into more of a perspective, heartbreaking as it may be. I think that's what makes it crucial and very rare.
Well, let's play a scene from the beginning of that episode. It's when Mo, his mother, and brother arrive in Tel Aviv, and they are immediately taken in for questioning by an Israeli guard. Have a listen.
Give me your bag. What is this shit?
It's a kafir.
How old are you?
40.
I need to see your phone. What's your code?
I don't have a code because I have nothing to hide. I have one question. Where are you from?
I'm Israeli.
No, I mean, where did your grandparents came from?
My grandparents are from Spain.
Spain. I was born here, my family was born here, yet you're questioning me.
What is your point?
Point was made.
So, like, that's a really tense scene, but yet it's not without its humor. So, Saloni, talk to me about the way this show uses comedy in these situations.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, as you said, this is not a scene where you expect to be laughing. And yet, I think the writing just weaves humor in so naturally. A lot of it comes from Mo's own comedic skill. He's been a stand-up comic for years now. And I think he has a very unique voice in terms of bringing his real experiences into the mix and, making it more sort of universally digestible. And I think this writing kind of weaves that into the mix. That's how we are able to consume the story and understand what it means, but also not feel bad about laughing at it. A lot of it also is the line delivery. I think all 3 actors are so funny. Mo and the actors who play his mother and brother are they really seem to understand their characters, and it's almost like they're giving us permission to laugh at it because of that. And I think that's what makes it easy. That's what makes it funny. That's why you kind of root for them. You connect with them. The humor is the gateway to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gateway to their humanity, really, right?
Totally.
So, and look, like this episode, Mo, in the episode, he's visiting his family in Burin, a village in the West Bank, and he learns a lot about the everyday challenges they're facing there. So Saloni, like, what are some of the examples from that really stuck with you?
Yeah, there's many. I mean, the scene itself is one. There's another scene in the finale in which there's a lost kid who kind of follows Mo's brother back to their home, and the whole family is now scared to go and return him back, even though they've done nothing wrong, because they fear that they might be blamed for it, they might be attacked for it, and it becomes a whole discussion. And I think that kind of really stood out to me because it's, they're just doing something that any good Samaritan would do. And yet there's a fear of being attacked for it. There's also just smaller scenes when Mo learns from his family about the land that they own, and yet they can't access it, or they learn about the settlements, or just kind of how they're scrutinized by the Israeli army on a day-to-day basis, to the extent that his family warns him not to walk outside alone. And I feel like those are the kind of things we don't think about. It's, we think about the larger scale impact, which is good, we should, but we don't think about the day-to-day smaller things that feel like normal things to us. So I think seeing all that through Mo's perspective really was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that scene you were talking about with the Israeli child, that gets strays away, and like Mo just wants to do a good thing and bring him back to his family, but then it turns so intense. It's such a powerful moment, definitely, yeah. And look, like Mo Amer, he talked about bringing a lot of his own life into this episode, into this show. He even tried to shoot this final episode in the West Bank. I think try to bring it a sort of directness and an authenticity by doing that. Clearly, I mean, they weren't allowed, right? Like that didn't happen. That was impossible. And yet, like, how does this show, like, nevertheless bring Mo's authenticity to the fore?
I think a huge part of that stems from the way that they depict the family scenes, the larger family scenes. When Mo goes back home in the show, he, is sitting on a dining table with his loved ones. These are people we've only heard about in the previous episodes, specifically through the lens of his mother, who is kind of going back to her homeland, meeting a lot of her people that she hasn't seen because they've been waiting for asylum for like decades. So I think seeing it through their perspective is what makes it feel so much more authentic. And then these are the characters who are telling us about what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. These are the characters who are taking us through the olive farms and to the mosque. So I think that's what lends it authenticity. And again, a lot of it is because it's lifted directly from Mo's life, who in real life is also a Palestinian refugee who then became a citizen. And I think without his like voice, of course, the show wouldn't exist and it wouldn't be as authentic as it is right now.
Well, look, like Mo, this series was canceled after 2 seasons, right? But do you think the story ran its course, or do you want to see more from this?
Oh, there's no way the story has run its course. I definitely want to see so much more from it. First, in general, it's just a good TV show. It's a well-made, funny, dramatic TV show that, makes us laugh, makes us cry. The ensemble is phenomenal. So just for that alone, I feel like it deserves to continue. And then, of course, it's the fact that you don't see TV shows like this. Not a lot of TV shows center a Palestinian American right now. And so I think besides being just really good TV, it's also timely and urgent. And, voices like Mo's need to be, we need to be able to access it on a global level. So I'm definitely bummed that the show is ending on Netflix after 2 seasons, but I hope they find a way to continue it somehow. I definitely don't think it's run its course. I feel like they were only just starting to kind of fine tune their voice and exactly what they want to say. And so I want to see more of that.
It's interesting because, like, for me, I feel like of course I want more of this show. It's such a fun show. But at the same time, like, if it had to end here, he did find a great endpoint. Like, it's such an emotional resolution in some sense, right? Even though it's not even able to address the current situation, it's addressing the history of that situation that got us here, right? I mean,
that's true.
Just quickly, like, if you had to pick like the funniest moment from this series, what would that be? Oh,
from the whole show? Oh, wow. That's, I mean, just from this season alone, I feel like when there's an episode where Mo is meeting his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, who is an Israeli chef. And I think that whole episode, that whole interaction, again, it could be something that's just really intense and horrifying and could turn into something really dark. But I think Mo's acting and, again, his voice brings so much humor to it. I'm like, why am I laughing at this? Why why is this entertaining, that normally when you hear about such things and such interactions, it might not be. And I think that made it really land for me. A lot of the scenes with Mo and his brother and his mother sometimes end up making me laugh, even though they're discussing some really serious things.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's tapping into something really cool.
Yeah, well, listen, like I love that episode, and I love how prickly it is and yet funny. Listen, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for talking to me about the show, Saloni. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Saloni Gajjar is a TV critic at the AV Club. Mo is now on Netflix. That's it for the show today. See us tomorrow.